from a part of Germany in the Rhineland, and it had a lot of mountains and hills. And so my family come here in 1850. When I was just a baby, I was 9 months. We settled by Ashford, way over by Fond du Lac. And from there, I go to Kansas, southeast Kansas. I learned blacksmithing, and I lived down there for 15 years. And I marry a girl, Anna Hall, and we have 4 daughters, but 2 of them died as infants. And my wife, Anna, she died giving birth to our last daughter. So here I am in Kansas, all by myself on a homestead with my blacksmith shop. And what to do? Well, I come back to Wisconsin. I go back to Ashford, and I meet Johanna Schoenhofen. And we get married. So then we go back to Kansas for a couple of years. And in 1883, in December, we come up here to Marshfield. And I bought a blacksmith shop from a fella named Johann Hebig. His wife is sitting right over there. When we bought this shop, it was a shop that was used. Would it look like this? Now, this is me right here. And these are a couple of my helpers. But what else do you know about this photograph? What do you see here? Well, yeah, black and white, yeah. What else do you see? You see a wagon. What else do you see?
A car?
No, no cars yet. This is 1883, 1884. What else do you see in there? Okay, that's the canopy over a wagon. But I'm thinking about this thing right here. What's this thing? What is that? It's a sled or a sleigh. Yeah, this is for the winter. This is how you get around in the winter. So this is where we start out. But we were here for about 3 years. When in June of 1887, dry month, and we're working in the shop, and all of a sudden the cry goes out, "Fire! Fire! Everybody run! Fire!" Well, over here where the shoe shop is by the museum, that was the old sawmill. And one of the steam locomotives went through, and a spark got into the sawdust, and it started this big fire, was spread throughout the whole upper part of the town. And my shop and my house across the street were all burned. Fortunately, Johanna and our children escaped. So what to do now, huh? We decide to rebuild. So what we do is we go down a couple of blocks, because what happened is the city wanted us to build a brick building, and we didn't have insurance enough money to build a brick, but we could build a wooden building again. So we go down. Do you guys know where the movie theater is?
Yes.
Right across the street. We built another wooden blacksmith shop in 1887. And in September of 1887, this is what it looked like. Now, here I am again. I show up again. That's me right there. And in this picture, what do you see? What's going to happen? There's a horse. Yeah. Here's a farmer with the horse. And what can you see? Can you see these 2 guys here? Here I am right here.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
What heck no.
What am I going to do? Good suggestion, but no. I'm going to work with the horse. What do you think I'm going to do with the horse? What do you think I got to do with the horse? What? No, I'm not going to ride it. Okay? I am going to take, and I'm going to put a horseshoe on the horse's hoof. And so in this picture here, you can't see it real well, but I'm holding a horseshoe with my tongs, and my partner has a box full of horseshoes and nails. And we're going to take and put a horseshoe on the horse's hoof. Now this is a winter scene. So we're going to use a big caulked, we call this caulked horseshoe. It's got some cleats in it, which allows the horse to move more steadily and with greater strength in the ice and the snow. And that's what we're going to put on their hoof. So this is a second shop. Now this shop stayed up until 1943. And then they ripped it down and they put up a building which now is the Elixir nightclub. And that's where our shop's at. So this is the family I had meet my second wife, Johanna. Here I am again, right there. That's me. And here's my wife, my second wife, Johanna. And these are our children we had together. Now, my two daughters, by the time this picture was taken, were already married. The two daughters that survived from Kansas. So they had married and they weren't in the picture. What happened to the kids?
Yeah.
Well, this one, these two guys right here, this one and this one, the two guys on the end and the back, they were born after I married Johanna and we went to Kansas. So down there, I had two daughters and two new sons. So those kids came to us with us to Marshfield. And then when we got to Marshfield, we had this guy. And his name was Jan. And then after that, we had Rose, and we had Nick, and we had Michael, and we had Leo. Leo was the youngest boy. He had appendicitis when he was 20 years old. And at that time, appendicitis could be very deadly. And it was. He went to the hospital here for operation, but he did not survive. And so he only lived to be 25 years old, Leo. Yeah. Life was nasty, brutish, and short. Now, this fella here, Johann, and his brother Nicholas is right here. Those two took over this shop when I retired. So these two boys right here, the two middle boys standing up, they took over the shop. And they run it until 1928. And then Nick stayed with the shop until 1941 when it had sold. And he moved out here by Seahafer Corners. And then they ripped the building down in 43 and put up what is now the Elixir nightclub.
Cool.
And from there, by the time we were done with that, that was pretty much the end of blacksmithing in Marshfield because everything turned over to driving cars. When we didn't really work on cars. And John bought a shop up across from Scotty's Pizza where the police station is now. And he had a woodworking shop and he still built some wagons, but then he started building car frames for Fisher Body over in Detroit. But he lost his business in the 1930s depression and went out to teach in the CCC camps and then came back and worked for Radis. Radis, that's where the factory is out here by the railroad tracks on the east end out here where the door factory is. No. Well, Radis, I don't know. I won't go there. I know some Radises, and they're pretty good people. So that is the story of the birds. Bergs. How do we pronounce my name? Berg. What does Berg with an E mean? Mountain. Very good.
Today, I am portraying Gabriel Lupien. Gabriel Lupien was a Civil War soldier that came to what became Marshfield with the Rivers brothers. You remember talking about Louis Rivers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that when you went down. Did you guys go to Heritage Museum?
Yeah.
Yeah, you saw that cabin when you first walked in. That's a replica of the cabin that the Rivers and the Lupiens be established here for railroad workers. So we'll get into that a little bit sooner. So Gabriel Lupien, born in 1840 in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. Prairie du Chien is on the Mississippi River in southwestern part of Wisconsin. as a child, his family moved to Portage, Wisconsin. Portage, Wisconsin is about 100 miles due south of Marshfield. So he moves there, and when he is 20 years old, he joined the Portage Rifles. Portage Rifles was like what we would call like the Wisconsin National Guard today. So in 1861, the Civil War was started up and it was going, right? So President Lincoln, he called into service all the state militias and volunteers. So in 1861, the Portage Rifles were formed into the 2nd Wisconsin Company G, called the Iron Brigade. The reason they were called the Iron Brigade is because when they went into battle, they fought like iron. And they also wore this fancy hat, all right? And this fancy hat is called a Hardy hat. So when other soldiers saw regiments wearing this hat, they knew that that was the Iron Brigade. So Gabriel and the Iron Brigade, they had numerous battles during the Civil War, but one of the biggest battles he was in was called the Battle of the Wilderness. And during the Battle of the Wilderness, it was a 3-day battle. It was brutal. Both sides giving and taking, a lot of casualties involved, right? So Gabriel, during one of the battles, during one of the days, he was shot through the arm. It shattered the bone in his arm. And in those days, there was no way of fixing the bones. So what do you think they had to do to his arm? Anybody? Shout it out.
Put it on. Put it on.
Amputated. Amputated. So he amputated his arm. So if he lost his arm, he was mustered out of service. He went back to, he healed up, and he went back to Portage, Wisconsin, where his family was. So eventually he got to know a lady called Mary Cushing. And after they dated for a while, they fell in love, and then what happens?
Get married.
Got married, exactly. So they were married, and they worked in a hotel and restaurant. So they had restaurant and hotel experience. And then they met a guy by the name of Louis Rivers. Louis and his brother Frank Rivers, they had also a hotel in Necedah, Wisconsin, and they hired him to work at their hotel. So Gabriel and his wife, they moved up to Necedah. Necedah is about 50 miles south of Marshfield. Then later on, Louis, he was quite the businessman and an entrepreneur, and he got a contract with the Fox Improvement Company to extend the rail line from Stevens Point through this area. This area was not even known as Marshfield at that time. It was known as Section 32. And so the Lupians and the Rivers, they came up, they trekked through the woods because there was no roads, and they established that cabin. And that cabin was for lodging. It was a hotel. It was a restaurant. It was a multi-purpose building. Anyone know where that was? Where that was located in Marshfield? Did anyone talk to about that? Okay. So you know where Casa Amigos restaurant is? Okay. In the back parking lot of that, on the corner of Chestnut and Depot, you're going to see a big historic plaque. If you go there, you can read the historic plaque. It'll tell you all about what I've been talking about. All right. So the Rivers and the Lupians, they established that. They're working that. Eventually, the rail line comes through here in 1872, and the city is named Marshfield, right?
Yep.
All right. So after that was all established, the Lupians said, "Well, we wanted to start farming, so we bought some land out near Bakerville, and they farmed for a while. And then they heard that Civil War veterans would be deeded free land for their Civil War service. So there was land available in the Dakotas, so they moved the Lupian family out to the Dakotas. But the Dakotas is nothing like Wisconsin. There isn't many trees, and the winters are brutally cold, and the summers are scorching hot. And finally, Gabriel says, enough is enough. We're coming back to Wisconsin. We're going to come back to Marshfield. Well, after the Marshfield fire, they were rebuilding, and they needed help. So the Lupians, they all helped, and they helped rebuild Marshfield, and they built buildings. But eventually, everybody gets old, right? Everyone gets old, right?
Yes.
What happens when we get really old? I die, unfortunately. So Gabriel dies on December 31st, 1902. What's the weather like on December 31st in Marshfield? Oh, what do we all have? Cold and what else?
No.
Snow. Cold winter snow, right? So he dies on New Year's Eve. They have the funeral service a couple days later. They bring him up here to do a committal service. How do you think they brought the casket and the pallbearers and the minister up? What did they use? Okay. What type of transportation did they use? Airplanes? Not quite. How about horses? Horses. And what did the horses pull?
Wagon.
Wagons. It's winter time though. What does Santa use?
Sleigh.
Yeah, so they brought him up on a sleigh. It's winter time, right? The roads there's no one plowing the roads because there's no need because there's very few cars and they don't need to do that. So anyway, they bring him up here. They lay him to rest. They go back into Marshfield and they cross the railroad tracks. You know where that railroad track is by St. Vincent de Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. And they cross the railroad tracks and one of the runners break and it spills the pallbearers. There's a lot of shouting. The minister falls out. The horses drive right over the minister. But guess what? The minister survived. He was fine. So you guys are what school again? Lincoln. Who did they name Lincoln after? Abraham Lincoln. Can you tell me now? Abraham Lincoln, he is on a coin. Does anybody know what coin he's on? Anybody?
Penny.
Okay, and he's also on paper money. Anybody know what paper money is on?
Dollar.
Anyone ever have a $5 bill?
No. I'm
Ah, too easy, right? Okay. All right. So, I'm gonna make it harder now.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. When the Civil War ended, the South surrendered to this general. He later became president.
Abraham. No, his name is JFK. William.
Okay, now we go back to the money. Who was on the $50 bill? Anybody?
George Washington.
I know it's hard. It's hard. I get it. Let's just ask Grants. All right. So, you talked about Abraham Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
How did Abraham Lincoln die?
He was assassinated. Old age.
He was assassinated. Does anybody know who the assassin, his name was?
Somebody.
John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth used the Philadelphia Derringer, very much like this. This is a replica of one. He snuck into where Lincoln and Mrs. Lincoln were, and he snuck in and he shot Mr. Lincoln. And Mr. Lincoln eventually died, and then.
And if you can tell me any one of those lies, I'll give you a bright, shiny coin.
Oh, what? Okay, that.
Okay?
Oh, bright, shiny what?
First of all, I was born in 1941.
That's a lie.
We'll gotta wait till the end here and remember those. Born in 1941 in Massachusetts. And when I was about 12 years old, we moved to Niles, Michigan. I was the youngest of a family of 8. And then after my father died, Michigan, we moved to Racine, Wisconsin. And my mother went to work, and she was working for Mrs. J.I. Case. Well, Mrs. J.I. Case is the one that's got the construction machinery and the tractors and all of that. Well, I ran errands for Mrs. Case. And when I was 20 years old, Civil War began. And I joined the Marshfield unit of the Bell City Rifles in Racine, Wisconsin. Well, we trained a bit and we went to Camp Randall. Does anybody know where Camp Randall is? Camp Randall. Anybody heard of the Badgers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do they play football?
Wisconsin. Wisconsin.
Yeah, where do they play?
Rapids.
Camp Randall. That's where the Bell City Rifles trained, was at Camp Randall. Well, we trained there for a couple months, and then we went out to Washington, D.C., and we were there for a little while, and then we went to war, went to battle. And in the first battle of Bull Run at Stone Bridge, I was shot right through the shoulder and out the back. And I fell, and my captain, Captain Strong, saw me, and he had two soldiers carry me back to the hospital. And while I was in the hospital, the Confederates overran the hospital, and they took me prisoners, and they shipped me off to Libby Prison. And in Libby Prison, things were pretty tough. But after 4 months, there was a prisoner exchange. And then this prisoner exchange was between the Union forces and the Confederate forces. Well, in January of 1862, during this prisoner exchange, 200 men were to be exchanged. 199 left and went to Baltimore. One man was left behind. That was me. I had heard that my back pay of $30 wasn't available yet, and so I left and went the next day. Well, because I didn't show up at that particular time, the leader of the group sent a telegram to my mother and said that I had died. And that was the second notice that she had gotten that I had died. Well, when I got to Baltimore the next day, I found that out, and I sent her an immediate letter that said, no, I was not dead. I was alive. Well, there I met a senator from Wisconsin called Senator Doolittle. And he took me, he said, do you want to go see the president? And I said, well, certainly I'd like to go see the president. So he took me to see President Kennedy. Well, the president wanted to see all the wounds that I had. He wanted to listen to, he wanted to hear how we were treated. Well, after a little while, a day or so, then I went back and visited my mother at Racine, Wisconsin. And I worked for a while with a brother, and then I got a letter from President Lincoln. President Lincoln said, I'm appointing you to West Point to become an Army officer. So I went to West Point for 4 years. And in 1866, I graduated from West Point and became a lieutenant. I became a lieutenant in the artillery, and my first assignment was at Fort Monroe, Virginia. And I guarded a very important prisoner. That prisoner was named Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. Well, in the evening times when he was locked up, I'd go visit him and we'd talk. And you know, he knew more about Wisconsin than I did. Why do you think he knew more about Wisconsin than I did?
Because you were in a different state.
No, that's not it. Jefferson Davis had gone to West Point and became an Army officer. He came to Wisconsin and fought in the Black Hawk Indian Wars. And then later on, he became president of the Confederacy. But after a couple of years in the service, I resigned my commission. Well, in the meantime, I had married my wife, Mary. We came back to Racine, and I worked with my brother Charles in the lumber business. And we opened up a lumber sawmill at Shawano. And after a couple of years, then I came to that little place in the woods called Marshfield, Wisconsin. There were only 12 families when we moved here. And I started a sawmill and a planing mill and a paint shop and a store, grocery store. All of these things and all these businesses we had going here in Marshfield. And then the fire fiend hit. And all my businesses burned down. And at the time, I had 125 men employed here in Marshfield. Well, there were 250 families that were homeless. And they wouldn't have a job unless I would rebuild. So the next morning, I raised the flag at the Rada's house, and I said, we're going to rebuild all my businesses. So we started rebuilding. Well, because of rebuilding the city of Marshfield, I became very famous in this state, and I was elected governor. Well, as president of the state of Wisconsin, I built a lot of buildings, not personally, but I was in charge of that. We built the Historical Society building, and we did some new prisons, built some mental health facilities. We did all kinds of good things, but I became very tired of politics. So I came back to Marshfield and started running my businesses again. Well, in 1912, my wife, Mary, died. And I became very sad.
Well, I'm Mary Kelly Upham, and I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, January of 1843. I was known as an intelligent woman, and I was well educated, and I even received a medical degree, which was unusual for women in my day. I was living in Racine, Wisconsin, and knew Will before he went into the Civil War Army. The Civil War lasted for 4 years, from 1861 to 65. And while Will was gone, I received word that he got killed. I was just devastated. However, I found out he was alive, and I rejoiced. After Will graduated from West Point in 1866, we had a wonderful courtship. And we were married December of 1867. After Will left the military, we moved to Kewanee, Wisconsin, and then to Angelica, which was in the heart of a great pine forest. We spent over 6 happy years there. And even though Will owned a shingle mill, our house never had siding. But we had much cheer inside. In September of 1878, we moved here to Marshfield. Will built a sawmill and a store, and we lived in the store. We lived in the store over the store for 2.5 years. The same year we moved here to Marshfield, we joined 14 other people, and we created and organized the Presbyterian Church. Mother Upham, Will's mom, always said that you should start a town with a church. I started teaching Sunday school and delighted in teaching the classes. One of the first things I did also was to organize the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And this organization worked very hard to warn people about the evils of alcohol on their bodies and souls. I worked very hard to help civilize this rough pioneer town of Marshfield. In the winter, I visited lumber camps, distributing Bibles and literature to the lumberjacks. Our big house was built like those Will had seen during the war in the South. The house was completed in 1880, and we moved in that November. Our home was always open for friends and relatives to visit and stay. I loved working with the young people and had organized the Band of Hope. And this was an organization for young boys, providing them with entertainment, education, and wholesome associations for refining the influence on those rough pioneer boys. We met in the office, or in a room above Will's office. Education was always very near and dear to my heart, for the love of books and education drove me to be very active in starting the first public library. I provided a room for the library in our home. That fateful day, June 27th, 1887, what happened?
The Marshfield Fire.
The Marshfield Fire, yes. The town was bustling as usual. At 11:45, the whistle sounded, and it was time for the men to go home for lunch. 4 minutes later, the whistle sounded again, and this time it was the signal fire. Oh, the fire spread quickly. My sister Ella dismissed her school class, and the boys helped us pack clothes and valuables in quilts so that we could take them by horse and wagon to Pleasant Hill. By 7:30 that evening, the center of Marshfield literally was destroyed. Our house was spared, although we did have windows on the north side that were shattered by the heat. The next day, I distributed food to those in need by horse and wagon. The wagon was driven by my 7-year-old nephew. I spent most of that summer helping those we lost everything. I was the first one. There was a lot of sickness in those days, and I always kept my medical bag prepared so that I could help mothers and sick children, never doctoring a death till surely God's hand was in my doctor. As the wife of the 18th governor of the state of Wisconsin, William Hutton, I served our state well, gracious and entertaining hostess, while being a devout mother and wife. I influenced my husband to present a number of social, including the establishment of a school to the retarded. The city of Madison, with its culture and pleasant treatment of us, will ever be wonderful days in our life. It was a really wonderful night for me. People were sad to see us leave Madison, but the stress that Will, with the duties of governor and his business back in Marshfield, it was damaging his health. Will and I had a wonderful life together. In the early years, we rode horseback. In the summer, we would go on family picnics. And in the winter, when it was too cold, we would do sleigh rides. We were married for 40 years. In 1912, I developed pneumonia. After being weakened by the illness, I passed away November of 1912. I was 69 years old. Was that? Oh, no, because then in those days the shots weren't available. At my funeral, the Reverend Melvin Laird spoke in his excerpts from funeral. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. Melvin Laird stated she placed at the disposal of this community her time, tact, and talents. Unlike others who have spent their energies enriching themselves alone, she was willing to spend and be spent that the community might be made better and the innocent lives protected. Old friends speak enthusiastically of her unselfish devotion, almost reckless at times of personal consequence. I hope that someday in the future, the people of this community will have the opportunity to meet in some public place where a more appropriate tribute can be paid to the memory of the one whom we all love. And then in 1907, what candy was made? It was a candy.
The water
Tootsie Roll.
Well, my name is Barbara Habig. I was born in Baden, Germany in 1847. And when I was 17 years old, my parents, Friedling and Barbara, decided that we were going to come to America. And so we boarded a ship and we took off. And that was the end of the end of August. While we were on the ship, and there were 8 ships that sailed together that day. While we were on the ship, we encountered storms, and they had told us not to go on a ship by yourself, just take another ship with you. Travel in pairs or more, so if you had problems, if there was a storm, that there might be somebody handy or close by that might be able to help you. Because we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have the relay systems that you could get a hold and say, hey, I'm out in the middle of the ocean, I need help. We didn't have that. So what we did is we would help each other. If, one of the ships maybe got low on food, we would share food and make sure everybody was taken care of. We didn't get to the United States until the 1st of November. So we were out on the ocean for almost 3 months. Needless to say, we all made it. There was one ship that we lost for a while. There was one of the really bad storms, and the ships kind of all blew different directions. But we all got back together except for the one. Well, at that point, we thought that maybe that ship hadn't made it. But we didn't find out until actually we got to New York that the ship was safe and sound in another port, and in the spring they would be allowed to come on to the United States. So that first year I lived with my mom and dad in New York. I was a nanny. Now, who can tell me what a nanny does?
Emma,
Yes.
it's like a babysitting or maybe like a grandma.
It's like a babysitter. You're exactly right. So they would take care of the kids while the mom would have to go. Maybe she had a job. Maybe she was a dressmaker, or she was a millinery person who made hats. Maybe she was a clerk in one of the stores for some of the guys. But there were women that worked in town as well. And so sometimes they would have to be away from their families, but they needed places or someone to take care of the kids. And that's where the nannies came in. Nannies not only took care of the kids, but they make food, make the meals, do the dishes. Sometimes they would do cleaning. Sometimes they even had to wash clothes, but they would do a lot of things to help mom out around the house. So that's what I did the first year when I was in New York. During that time, I met a man by the name of John Habig. Oh, he was so dreamy. Oh, he was a blacksmith by trade. And I know that you just came from Mr. Mike Bauer, right? Okay. And our families kind of got to know each other because he bought one of my husband's shops. So we kind of knew each other. As time went on, during that year, the guys would meet downtown after they'd come home from supper. They'd go back downtown and they'd kind of talk to the other guys, find out who had come in from out in the country, what farmers had come in, what news was going on. They were worse than a bunch of old ladies, let me tell you that, okay? But they were able to share those things because they would come home and tell us what they had found out. So what was nice was they found out later that they had another common interest, and that was music. Now, some of the guys had been in men's choirs in the communities where they had come from. Some of them had been in community bands, some of them even in fancy orchestras. So some of these guys moved to Marshfield with instruments. Some of them knew how to sing, so they'd sing along, hum along, whatever. But they decided one of those evenings that they were going to form a band. One of the gentlemen downtown, his first name was Herman, he had been a band conductor. And so he said, well, I'm not great at this, but I will help you guys out. He ordered some music. So they had music that they could learn how to play together. Well, they were having one of their practice sessions one evening, and it was about the 2nd of July. And they had this idea that they should have a 4th of July parade 2 days before the parade. Now, you have to remember, like I said, when we came in January, there weren't that many businesses in town. So the businesses that were here would put together a wagon, hook up their horses to it. Maybe they painted a special sign that day, nailed it onto the side of the wagon, and that was their float. Some of the guys just rode a horse, but the guys who played in the band or kind of sang along with the band, they actually marched. Well, one of the problems was when John came home and he told me about the parade, he said, but Barbara, we don't have a flag. Now, remember, most of these people who were living in Marshfield at this time were not born here. They had come from other communities, and many of them from other countries. And so they were now a U.S. citizen, or, they were an American. And they were very proud of that. And so they wanted, like many of the other communities, when they had a parade, would usually start out with an American flag at the beginning of the parade. My husband said, Barbara, I told them that you would make a flag for the parade 2 days before the parade. Now, luckily, I was very fortunate. I had a treadle sewing machine, and I was one of the few ladies in town that did. Now, how many of you know how a treadle sewing machine works? We did not have electricity at that point in time. So I couldn't just take my sewing machine, set it up on the table quick, and plug it in, and off I'd go. I couldn't do that. Yes?
You could do, like, have a thing you needed to
Yes. There was a metal plate or a grid. Some of the machines were fancier. They had fancy grids and things like that. But there was some type of a plate, kind of a rectangular plate down next to the floor that tilted back and forth. And you'd put your feet on that and move your feet up and down, and that would make the belt turn and move to the gears up on the top, which made the gears in the machine work, and that would make the needle go up and down. And that's how you would sew. So the next morning, Mary, my oldest daughter, and I went downtown to the one store that we had, and they sold everything, let me tell you. But one of the things they also had was fabric. So we got red, white, and blue fabric, enough to make a 6-foot wide or long flag. We got home, we cut out the strips, we cut out the field of blue, and then one of John's friends downtown was a tinsmith, and he cut out a pattern of a star for me so that while I was sewing the strips together, Mary was tracing the pattern of the star onto the white fabric. When we got the flag base put together, then we started hand sewing all of the stars on. Now, can anybody tell me back in 1879 how many stars you had on the flag? Yes.
50 to represent the 50 states.
Nope, there weren't 50 states at that time. There was less.
13.
There was more than 13. I'll give you a hint. It starts with 3 and ends with 8. 38. Very good. Okay.
Say 12.
This is actually what the flag looked like. And if you look carefully at the stars, they look a little bit different than what they do today, because today we have the 50 stars on, right? Okay, so it looks a little bit different. But the main part of the flag, the 13 stripes and the field of blue, are all the same. It's just the number of stars that they add. Yes,
What does the 13 stripes stand for?
the original 13 colonies.
Oh. What a colony.
And do you, as long as we're talking about the flag, do you know why there are red stripes on it? Yes.
To represent the 13 states?
Well, the 13 stripes represent the original 13 colonies that were here, or states. But the red is to represent the blood that was shed in order to form the United States, to bring us together. So that's what that stands for. Okay, so we'll go on. Mary and I worked on the flag. We worked into the night. Mary was getting tired. She had been helping me all day. I told her to go to bed. My husband helped get the kids into bed. And I kept working on the flag. About the time that they got up for breakfast the next morning is about the time I sewed on the last star. It was done. It was finished. I carefully folded it up, gave it to John after he had his breakfast, and he was out the door and ready to get set up for the parade. Now, the parade was a little bit different than what we're used to having. Our June Dairy Days is coming up next weekend, right? You guys excited for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, June Dairy Days, that parade goes up and down Central Avenue. Those days, we met on the corner of 3rd Street and South Central, kind of on the corner where the BMO parking lot is today. And instead of going on Central for the parade, we went up the street to the east on 3rd Street, up into the Pleasant Hill area. Because we'd had rain a few days before that, a lot of the lower places in town were still kind of soft, squishy, easy to get muddy. So we wanted to be a place where it was high and dry. The women packed big picnic baskets. We had a party afterwards. We played games. The kids did gunny sack races. They did all kinds of fun things. One of the merchants from downtown, took the flag, carefully stored it in his business, because my husband didn't want to keep it in the blacksmith shop, which was good. And it was safe there until something happened downtown
Fire.
a little while later.
Fire.
The fire.
June 27th.
June 27th? 24th.
No. Yeah,
Was it the 27th?
Yeah.
Okay. 1887. Okay, so what happened that day, the whistle went off at noon, a couple short little blasts to let the guys know. But then there was a really long whistle. And that meant that there was something wrong. So the guys ran out of their stores, looked to see, they could see the smoke coming from the upper mill. They ran over there to see if they could help. Long story short, many of the businesses in that downtown area burnt completely down to the ground. And if you haven't been over to the museum where the old library used to be, okay, the diorama of what the city looked like after the fire, it's devastating. It really is. So I'm gonna go past that day. Everybody survived except for one dog. He stayed in the shop. He had been trained to stay by his master's coat. The master ran out of the business when the whistle went off. He left his coat laid on the coat rack. The dog had been trained to stay there, and he did, and went down with the building. Okay, Mrs. Habig, in addition to loving to sew, she also liked to bake. I would bake cookies. I would bake bread. I would do cakes, muffins, you name it. I loved making it. And so after I'd have the kids ready for school in the morning, one of the things I would do is start my baking. And every so often, I would hear a little knock, knock, knock on the door. Mrs. Haybank, Mrs. Haybank, you need a taste tester? And I tell you what, how many of you would like to be a taste? I am Mrs. Anna Beal, and I'm very excited to tell you all about my husband, Fred Beal. How many of you have heard of Fred Beal before? Fantastic. Well, my husband was a hero, a leader, and a great honest man. You know him as a police officer and a wrestler. But you know what? He was so much more than that. My Freddie, that's what I call him, was born on January 17th, 1876 in Germany. He moved here to the United States when he was about 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
As a boy, he attended Emmanuel Lutheran School. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah. Sure.
Awesome. And he was on something called the honor roll. Does anyone know what an honor roll is?
Yes. Is it is it like something to like honor the people who's maybe served in something?
No, when you're in school, you have a chance to be on an honor roll. And an honor roll is saying that you've studied very hard and you're one of the top students. Well, my Freddie, he believed it was very important to work hard in school, which I'm sure you all think so too. At the age of 14, he started working at Upham Furniture Factory. Have you heard of Mr. Upham?
Yes.
Great man. He started working at the furniture factory and was known as the strong boy of Marshfield.
That's me.
Now, he didn't see any sense in using a truck when you could just heft up that furniture and carry it wherever you needed to go.
True.
It was said that he could take the rear end of a fire engine that had some men and boys on it and pick it right up. I think that prepared him for his wrestling. He could pick it up. Now, my Freddie, he started wrestling in 1896 when he was about 20 years old. And this is a picture of him as a wrestler. Isn't he handsome?
You look like Tom Holland.
Oh, I have many pictures, but I only brought them. Now, back then, my Freddie, he didn't know any of the holds you have to have when you're a wrestler. He just won by sheer force. And when he actually started to train and do the actual holds, he made a name for himself. But you know what? The crowds would laugh at him because he was tiny for a wrestler. My Freddie was only 5 feet 6 inches tall and about 165 pounds. Not very big for a wrestler back then. Now, back then, some wrestlers, they were known to cheat. But not my Freddie. My Freddie, he took it as a job. And he did his job well. He loved his friends. He loved me. He was very humble and modest. And he was honest and true to the sport of wrestling. Now, something you probably didn't know about Freddie was that he and the Cole brothers started a circus here in Marshfield. They got a big tent and they planned to go all the neighborhood towns in the summer of 1896. Their first performance was in that year. Now, my Freddie, you're probably wondering, what would he do in a circus? Well, he was a strong man. He was said to balance the weight of 4 men, his neck and shoulders alone. They held a huge performance on July 4th, 1897. And it had over 500 people show up. That summer, the circus supplied lots of entertainment for all of us. We got married on August 6th, 1902. Here's a picture of us. Now, this is my Freddie, and this is me. Yes, you have a question?
I'm a state champion in wrestling.
Wow, congratulations. Now, while we were married, my Freddie continued to wrestle, and he held 3 championships all at the same time. He was the middleweight, the light heavyweight, and the heavyweight champion all at the same time. His biggest win was over a man named Frank Gotch. Now, that man was 45 pounds heavier than my Freddie. And he was, at the time, the reigning heavyweight champ. But Freddie beat him. And he earned a new nickname, and his nickname became Little Wisconsin Wonder.
Yeah.
Now, Freddie retired from wrestling in 1919. In 1921, he began working as a relief officer for the Marshfield Police Department. On August 5th, 1933, the night before our 31st wedding anniversary, at 3 o'clock in the morning, Freddie and his partner, Officer Fikesen, responded to a burglary in the office of the Marshfield Brewery. Now, that is located at the hospital's daycare, or just north of where Grant Mini Park is. His partner entered the building and shots were fired. So my Freddie, he left the patrol car to go help. And as he rounded the front of his car, the suspects came out firing as they ran. My Freddie, he was shot and killed instantly. I couldn't believe it when they told me. I miss him so much. The city lost a great man that day. My Freddie remains the only police officer, or Marshfield officer, to die in the line of duty. The Marshfield Board of Education named a football stadium after him in November of 1941. It was called Beale Stadium. Does anyone know where Beale Stadium is? Yes. Well, it used to be the high school, but not the high school now. It is by a school, yes?
It's by the middle school.
The middle school. Now, that's where the high school used to play football until they got their new field. But that is still called Beale Stadium. And they named it because Freddie showed great sportsmanship. He was an athlete and never bragged about his strength or the wins he had. Freddie was inducted into the Wisconsin Athletic Hall of Fame in 1972 and the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2022. My Freddie loved this city, and he loved to call it home. He believed in being honest and helping others, and he would want each and every one of you to study hard and believe in yourself as well. Now, the bench I'm sitting on is a special bench that was donated by the Marshfield Police Department in recognition that he is today still the only Marshfield officer that was killed in the line of duty. And you'll notice that the grave sites are also a little bit different. There are placards up that are given by the Marshfield Police Office. This is where my husband Freddie is. This is Anna's, and there's a special spot that was designed for our children, but we never had any children before Freddie was killed. And so as you come up, I'm going to let you take a look at the bench before you head off, and I have little police badges for each and every one of you. All I ask is if you put the badge on, that the little white piece either goes in one of your pockets or given to one of the parents so it's not floating around the cemetery. All right. Do you have any questions?
That to be good.
Yes.
We'll save the questions for later, boys and girls.
Thank you.
What happened? What happened? Why did you say like Is it what type of duty did you mean?
A relief officer means he was called when they actually needed extra help.
What are two other people
Beer.
We're going to talk about history today. Okay. So why do we want to learn about history?
so we know what's around Marshfield.
So we know what's around Marshfield, but something else.
So we
Say again.
so we know what is about is
So we can appreciate what it's about, right? And
so what happened back in the day.
and what happened back in the day? What happened back in the day that made the community what it is today is what's important for us, so we can appreciate what other people did to provide for us. And so we're learning about the history. My name is Father Jock, and I came to Marshfield in 1886, and I worked with the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother. And when I first got here, I was a parish priest, and I had a parish over in Auburndale, over in Millador. I helped out at St. John's. I actually went all the way up to Dorchester to provide church services in different places. But in 1891, the bishop made me the confessor for the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, which means I was just the priest that was assigned to them. What did the Sisters of Sorrowful Mother do here in Marshfield?
They were like nurses and and they took care of like the houses.
They came to Marshfield in 1890 to do just what you said, to establish a hospital, to take care of the patients here. And they were like nurses. They actually started a nursing school here in Marshfield that lasted for 75, 80 years. Okay, so the sisters came in 1890. We know the hospital's across the street here from us. Is that where they originally intended to put the hospital? Did anybody know where they were going to put it?
Patriots Tower.
No, not Patriots Tower.
St. John.
Across the road from St. John's. Father Geyer was the pastor at St. John's when the sisters came, and he wanted to have the hospital built in what we know today as Columbia Park. Look at how big that hospital has grown. It would have totally destroyed that park area if that's where it had been. But there was a problem with the deed to the property, and they couldn't build there because they only had half the property. And so they had an opportunity to buy land out here, or get land out here, and they decided to build out here. Now, out here in 1890 was the country. There were farms all the way, well, there was farms down there, there was farms back there. Actually, the cemetery sits on mostly farmland. So what made them come out here was the land that they had. And when they came, the cemetery was already here. You know what the road was called in front of the house or the hospital?
Hillside.
No,
St. Joseph.
not St. Joseph's. The only thing out here was the cemetery. And so that road, when they came out here, was called Cemetery Hill. Now, if you had a hospital and you were trying to advertise good patient care, would you want the address to be 1010 Cemetery Road? So in 1909, the sisters and all the people that lived on the road by that time had the name changed to St. Joseph Avenue. Now, when the sisters first got here, were there lots of patients? Were there lots of people they had to take care of?
No, not many much because if you're talking about that, Marshfield hasn't really deepened Marshfield.
Well, by that time they had 3,000 plus people in Marshfield, but the first year that they had the hospital open, they only admitted 2 patients. Not enough to live on. So the sisters had to do something different to be able to provide for the hospital, to pay the mortgage on the hospital. They owed $6,000 on that hospital building they put up. You ever see a picture of the first hospital? This is what the hospital looked like back in 1890. And so there was a mortgage on there for about $5,000, maybe $6,000, and they had to have money to pay that mortgage.
And Mother Frances, Mary Frances Stridle had a lot of faith that it was going to be done, but she wanted things done cheap, but there was still things to pay for. And so they had to come up with a way of making money. And there were two things they did. Both of them were pretty unique. The first one, what was this area like when the people first settled Marshfield? Okay, go ahead.
It had not much people and there wasn't much buildings.
There wasn't much buildings.
It was just all farmland.
No, not farmland yet. Up here, this was all hardwoods. And Marshfield was, basically wherever you looked, there were trees. And it wasn't until the people settled this area where they came in and they logged the timber that was standing, made logs out of it, then hauled it to a sawmill to make lumber, that they started to clear land for farms. But what they did when they were logging was dangerous. And so there was always a risk for these people to get hurt. And it was important to have a hospital or a place for people to go to get treated. And so the sisters did something really smart. They sold tickets. Did you ever hear this story? What would they sell a ticket for? They sold two types of ticket, a $5 ticket and a $10 ticket. What'd you get for that? If you got hurt in the woods, for a $5 ticket, you got all free health care. They could be spend a week in the hospital and they didn't charge you a dime. And if you had a $10 ticket, you were in the hospital for a week, then you got a $5 check from them every week you're in the hospital. It was a good deal. They had a hard time getting some patients to leave the hospital. The other thing they did was, back when I had to go to Germany at one time because I was sick. And while I was there, I learned a water treatment called the
Knife water cure.
There's a knife water cure. And so when the sisters didn't have a lot of customers, I taught the sisters how to do that, and they started doing it here. And that was how they really put the hospital on the map. Now, one of the things about the knife water cure is that you need water for that. And we're up on a hill. They had a well drilled, but the well eventually went dry. And so then they had to depend on the city to bring water up to them every day. But they really were successful with that cure. Why were they successful? They had patients coming from all over Wisconsin, from Minnesota, from Illinois, Kansas, Missouri. They all came to Marshfield for that Kniep water cure. Why would they do that? What would make it easy for them to do that? What was Marshfield's nickname in the 1890s?
How did they get here?
Yeah. Okay, everybody together. I think you all know. Oh, no, that's not what. All right. Hub City, right.
But you were right. At what section?
Yeah, it was section 32. But Hub City, because we had railroads coming here, you couldn't go anywhere in Wisconsin without coming to Marshfield. So one of the reasons why the treatment was successful was because it was easy to get to Marshfield to get it. Now, I'm just thinking about my time here.
Yeah.
This is Father Jacques' memorial. Now, I don't think he's buried here, but I don't know for sure. But you see this big flat top on here? Doesn't it look like something's missing?
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Yes, there's something missing. When this was put up, when Father Jacques died in the 40s, they had a statue on there. There was a big white statue of the Blessed Virgin with Jesus after he died on the cross. And so you have this statue here that got moved. And the Catholic cemetery, if you look down there, at the entrance is the statue that used to sit on here. They moved it over there to create a new entrance when the old entrance cross came down. And so that actually was what was up here at one time. Just trying to.
Yeah, it's probably about.
Yep, I was going to say, I'm got my notes here. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
How old was he when he died?
He was born in 1853 and he died in the 40s. I don't remember if it was 83, somewhere in the 80s. Yes.
How long?
Was alive today, we would be neighbors.
If you sat on my front porch and she sat on her front porch, we'd be able to wave back and forth to each other, which is really kind of cool. Now, Mrs. Connor is really important to Marshfield for lots of reasons, and I'm going to tell you her story. She was born September 16, 1865, in Wisconsin Rapids. Her parents named her Hulda Maybelle Witter. Isn't that terrible? Yeah, she thought so too. As soon as she was big enough, she said, "Please call me Mary, because that's a name that I love." But guess what? They didn't. She had brothers who would not listen to her, and they called her Mamie. So the name Mamie stuck for the rest of her life. So, but it's certainly better than Hulda Maybelle, don't you think? Yeah. Now, her dad was George Witter, a great man, a doctor, even the mayor of Wisconsin Rapids. When her dad would go out in the horse and buggy to help his patients, I got to go along and help him. I really liked meeting new people and learning new things. I enjoyed reading, I liked to paint, and I loved to play the piano really loud just to bug my brothers. What do you guys like to do?
Walk. Read and draw.
Awesome. What do you do? Yeah. Sports. Beautiful. What? Soccer? No? What was it? Goggable. Okay. Swimming is amazing and goggable.
Reading and playing video games.
What's a video game?
Well, it's a game.
Oh, is it outside?
No.
So it's an inside game.
Yeah, you
Oh, cool.
playing with my video.
Good.
Playing with soccer and drawing expensive.
Those are wonderful.
Playing with my brother and playing with my dog.
Dog. Oh, I love that. You're the first one to mention their pet. That's cheerleading. That's amazing. Oh, you have a pet too.
Making books.
You like to make a book? That's wonderful.
Love playing with my puppies.
Oh, I love all these answers. These are great. There was one thing that I learned when I was right about your age. My mom's name was Frances Phelps Witter, and she taught me something very important. She taught me to always be proud of my country and my heritage, because her family was one of the very first settlers in America, not in Wisconsin, but in America before it was the United States of America. Pretty cool, huh? Now, I was always a good student, just like all of you. I loved school, and I was so lucky I got to be the very first girl from all of Wood County to graduate from UW-Madison. Isn't that super? Now, back then, there were very few classes that women could take, and very few jobs that women were allowed to do. But I always wanted to be a teacher. So that's what I became. Pretty cool, huh? Now, about the time I got done with college, I was missing those stinky brothers of mine. So I took a good job teaching in a little town just south of here. I bet you've never heard of it. It's Auburndale. Do you know where it is? You do?
I want them.
Really? That's great. Do you know where Auburndale is? Super. And you too?
I love them.
You live in Auburndale?
Yes.
That's amazing. That's where I met my husband, W.D. Connor. Oh, he was so cute. We got married in 1886. He was in the lumber business for his family. He worked very hard to please his father, Robert. He was always out in the forest, cutting down trees, getting new lines up, looking for ways to make money with the lumbering. He even founded another new lumbering town. I bet you don't know this one. Stratford. Seriously? You know where Stratford is?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, you kids must get around. You know where Stratford is, right? Okay. Now, W.D. was also a member of the Wood County Board of Supervisors for 20 years. He even became the lieutenant governor of our fine state of state of
Wisconsin.
you got it. Very good. He became the president of the Connor Lumber Company, the American National Bank, and even the Marshfield Public Library. He was so busy, but guess what? I was even busier. I had 7 children. 7. Yeah. They were the light of my life. My oldest daughter, Helen Melissa, a beautiful name, don't you think? She was a beautiful blonde, blue-eyed baby, born in 1888. Then came my son Donald. Did you ever like him?
No, my mom is. I think my mom's name.
Oh, lovely. Then my son Donald. And do you want the whole big long list?
Yep.
Yep.
Sure.
Soon after, there was Mary and Elizabeth, William Duncan, Richard Malcolm, Gordon Robert, and finally, Constance Jane Victoria. I have to carry this paper just to keep my kids' names straight. They enjoyed hours playing outside, riding horses, playing baseball. They loved to camp. I bet you guys might like camping too.
I'm going camping this weekend.
This weekend? That's super. You too?
That's true.
Oh my gosh, you get to go camping
Every weekend.
Oh, you are so lucky. Awesome. That's very soon. That's next week.
I've never.
Yeah. Super. Now, we even went up north and stayed at our cottage. It's on Birch Lake. It didn't have indoor plumbing. What does that mean? You're right. Didn't have electricity either.
They have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. What does indoor plumbing bring you? No. Where did we go to the bathroom?
The chamber pot.
Well, we could use the chamber pot, especially if you were sick.
Yeah, we're outside.
But where did you usually go to the bathroom? Well, it was just like a porta potty, but it wasn't called that then. It was called an outhouse.
House.
You got it.
Oh yeah.
Now, that's where we went to the bathroom. But how do we wash our dishes? How do we keep clean?
Oh.
Exactly. We pumped the water from the well to get the clean water to wash our dishes. Where did we take our bath?
Oh.
Any good guesses?
In the lake.
You got it. You just took a bar of soap, some shampoo, down to the lake, and got your body clean down there.
Yes, I'm not.
I've done that.
Now, my kids grew so fast, just like you guys. I had to keep busy doing other things. I joined the women's travel class, which became the women's club. We helped organize the very first free public library here in Marshfield. What does that mean? Free public library.
That means that it's free.
Yes, but what does it mean to be free and public?
Yeah, anybody can come inside and you don't have to pay for anything.
Exactly. Anybody can come inside and you don't have to pay a penny. So no matter how rich or how poor you are, you can read whatever you want. Isn't that cool?
We only have to buy it.
You can borrow a book and take it home so long as you bring it back. And you need a library card. And it still works like that today.
What happens if we don't do it?
Oh, you might get a fine. Might get a fine. Now, our group put on plays. We taught each other about foreign countries. We use this motto, they can who think they can. What does that mean?
Whoever thinks they can do something can do it.
Exactly. You put your mind to it, you have determination, and you get it done. So our group did something pretty amazing, really. We started this thing called the suffragette movement around here. Suffragette, that's a tough word. It comes from suffering. What does it mean to suffer? Yeah.
Like to not be hard hard to breathe.
Could be.
Or-
Can't get enough air.
Yeah.
You can't get what you need, right?
Yeah. You can't get what you need.
Exactly. Why were women suffering back then?
Because they couldn't have as much job.
Bingo. They couldn't get the jobs they wanted, so they couldn't make the money they needed to survive. Sometimes that meant they had to do without food. That means that they were hungry, which is suffering, right? Yeah. It was a tough life. We also were suffering because we couldn't pick our president. We couldn't pick our mayors. We couldn't pick our representatives.
Everybody got angry with each other.
They did, especially the women. You made big signs like this. We yelled really loud. We went to Madison. We went to Washington, D.C. We told everybody women need to vote. And guess what?
You got to vote.
We did it. In 1920, they passed the amendment, the 19th Amendment, allowing women the right to vote. So now we're no longer suffering. We can do jobs that we want. We can vote for whoever we wish. But this gives you guys a big responsibility when you turn 18. What do you have to do?
Work.
Work and
Vote.
vote. You got it. Vote for whoever you wish. Now, I also help form the Helping Hand Society right here in Marshfield, which is still here today, helping many people who need it. Now, this is a mausoleum, but it wasn't built for me. It's a very sad story. It was built for my son Donald. Remember the second baby? He was driving one of the very first automobiles in Marshfield, and he had a terrible crash and died at the age of 24.
24.
24. It's really young. And it was the saddest day of my life. We built this mausoleum for him, and this is where I rest today after a long, full life. I died in 1935 at the age of 70 after helping so many people here in Marshfield. Oh, did we ever cry? I'm even wearing my mourning beads. This is what women wore back then when they were mourning or very, very sad. They wore jet black beads to show people how sad they were. But to make you guys a little happier before you leave,